You put in a cover crop last autumn. It is early spring. The cover crop is still there, and the advice says wait 3 weeks after you chop it down before you plant into it. 3 weeks! That is 3 weeks of growing season you are not using. Stacey Murphy has a cheat that lets you start harvesting weeks before anyone who follows the standard advice. And it also includes one of the most elegant interplanting systems in small space gardening: garlic and tomatoes in the same bed at the same time.
Too. So what that means is that if I shave my cover crop all the way down to the earth, and then basically so it's like brown, so like no green is left, and then I would create little pockets for my fast-growing plants. So I wouldn't be able to necessarily plant like a bed of arugula where I broadcast seed because it's going to compete with the root systems of the cover crop. But I could dig little pockets and put in pea transplants, and I would put in transplants.
For more information, free resources, and gentle guidance, you can find us at growyourownvegetables.org. And to grow alongside other gardeners just like you, join our free community at gyov.org. This Q&A was recorded at a past Grow Your Own Vegetables event, where Stacey Murphy reveals how to get your first spring harvest weeks earlier, and how to get 2 harvests from one bed using garlic and tomatoes together.
I'm going to shoot for those crops that have very short days to maturity: radish, pea shoots, spinach, lettuce, arugula, bok choy, knowing that in the spring these are going to grow a little bit slower. So I may not get full size necessarily depending on when I pull it out, but I'm shooting for short and fast crops. And notice that they all have small root systems too. So what that means is that if I shave my cover crop all the way down to the earth, and then basically so it's like brown, so like no green is left, and then I would create little pockets for my fast-growing plants. So I wouldn't be able to necessarily plant like a bed of arugula where I broadcast seed because it's going to compete with the root systems of the cover crop. But I could dig little pockets and put in pea transplants, and I would put in transplants. I wouldn't plant seeds. I would put in transplants. Dig up a little area that's like a couple inches wide, and make sure the root systems of that cover crop are broken up so that you're not competing, and then plant in my transplants. And maybe it's bok choy, maybe it's peas, maybe it's spinach. Radish is going to be tricky because it's something that you seed, so it's going to be a little bit trickier, but you could create like a line where you dig up the root systems from that cover crop, and you go in a single line with your radish, so that way the radish isn't competing with the root systems that are still dying off underground. And then hopefully the idea is that if these are fast maturing, bok choy is going to be baby bok choy even in 21 days. 28 days is going to be better baby, it's going to be bigger. 40 days it might be full size. And keeping in mind, again, if the spring is chilly, it might not grow super fast. So all this might be baby food. So again, you're kind of compromising a bit here, but you're getting spring food, which maybe for me, I always want food coming out of my garden. Like, I think that's really important. So
this is the cheat. Shave, not chop and drop. The difference is everything. Chopping leaves decomposing material that temporarily robs your transplants of nutrients as it breaks down. Shaving removes that problem entirely. You plant immediately. Spring food arrives in weeks.
Really important. So if I'm living in a cold climate, when the ground thaws, I'm getting food in the ground. Somehow I'm getting food in the ground. So that's my preference. And then when it's time to plant the next round of crops, the idea is that the plants, the bok choy and some of those other things, you can still transplant around them if you plan your spacings well and plant your peas and plant your bok choy and arugula, whatever plants you're putting in the ground, spinach, in such a way that you have a place to put in your hot weather crops when they're ready to go in the ground, then there'll be space for it, and the cover crop by then will have died off, and it'll be ready. So that would be my way that I would cheat the system, and I would get a little bit of everything. And I'm curious if you have a response to that. Okay, let's see. Okay, Michelle, I see your question. Okay. So I just want to let you know, Michelle, that I see your question, and I know we're coming close to the end. Okay, so that's the way that I would get a little bit of everything into the ground. And you may decide that in different beds you do different things. What if in the spring you wanted to put a bed of arugula in right away? You wanted spring arugula or spring spinach, and you wanted to broadcast those seeds. Then for that particular area, I don't know that I would cover crop, because it's not going to be as useful. You wouldn't necessarily be able to dig it all out. Basically what you'd have to do is dig out the cover crop and maybe put it in the compost bin, which you can do. But what I would rather do is maybe mulch heavily in the fall, and then when spring comes, do a bed of arugula with seeds in that area. So you can do a combination of things depending on which area. This is why what I like to do is have a crop plan that I use again and again, year after year. So if I know the crop rotation is shifting from one area to the next, I know where my arugula bed is going to be, and so I know that I'm not going to mulch there. So this is the big benefit of creating a crop plan that's a year long, and you know where things are moving next year, so that you know whether you should cover crop or not. And then some beds you might want to overwinter, and so again, trying to do a little bit of everything, right? I know you planted garlic. I think you tried carrots and also leeks. I'm not sure what else you tried to overwinter. And those things are going to be ready. It's going to take a little while in the spring. It's a good 6 weeks for garlic to come in after the thaw. And so what I like to do is, if I have a bed that's filled with garlic or an area that's filled with garlic, that's actually in my crop rotation. My tomatoes go in after my garlic. And so what I do is I plant my garlic the 4 inches apart, and then I pull out every other one for baby spring garlic so that I have some taste of it as spring is coming on. And then when it's time to transplant my tomatoes, I basically pull out some more garlic, enough so that I can fit my tomato transplants in between all the garlic. And then I just let the garlic go, because the garlic at this point is bigger than the tomato transplants. And it's going to get pulled out of the garden usually by mid-June. And so by then the tomato roots are still small and I'm not interrupting them. So that's the way that I think about it. And really you have to decide what's important to you.
This is one of the most elegant small space systems in this entire video. You get baby spring garlic, a luxury crop that costs a fortune at the farmer's market, and then a full summer of tomatoes from the exact same bed. Plant it this autumn and you will use it every single year.
To you. And with this whole process, if you know that getting your summer crops in on the very best date is the most important thing to you, because you want to maximize the amount of tomatoes, cucumbers, and all those big crops, you want to maximize that. If that's the most important thing, is to get those crops in on time, don't let anything stand in your way. So if you have cover cropped and it's not, you didn't chop and drop it, and you didn't give, because usually when people chop and drop, they leave a couple weeks before they plant into it. As long as you, what I was saying before about these transplants, if you shave the cover crop all the way down and then basically dig a hole for your transplants, that's going to work fine. as long as the chop and drop isn't on top of your plants. Because what can happen is if you chop and drop a bunch of material right on top of little baby plants, is that you're going to get things like the things that like that debris, things like slugs, are going to find your plants much more easily because there's a lot of chop and drop all around your plants. But what you can do is shave that cover crop all the way down to the earth, dig little holes for those transplants, take that chop and drop and put it somewhere where it makes the most sense if you don't have space for it around these transplants. So like I was going to say here is knowing what's most important.
This is the science behind the cheat. Chopping and dropping starts a decomposition process that competes with your transplants for nutrients. Shaving to bare earth eliminates that competition. You are not skipping steps. You are removing the step that causes the problem.
Important. You can also, if the most important thing is getting those tomato plants in the ground on the right date, if you chop your cover crop down a little bit later because you put a cover crop in place and you didn't do a spring crop, you can basically same thing, dig a kind of hole in an area where you're putting your tomato transplants, and then make sure that that chop and drop is nowhere near those tomato transplants, that it's elsewhere in the bed, so that as it takes its time to break down, it's not necessarily right next to the plant. Now, sometimes what happens with the chop and drop is that the soil is adjusting to all those different nutrients, and so the reason why we like to leave time for that chop and drop before we plant into it is for all those nutrients to break down so that it doesn't rob the plants of nutrients in the process. And so if that's something of a concern, you could always take the things that you've chopped and put it in the compost pile. That's one of the ways to get around that. So if the most important thing is getting the tomatoes in the ground, don't let anything stand in your way. Even if you have to pull out the cover crop, pull it out of the ground completely and compost it separately. If the most important thing is getting the tomato plant in the ground, get it in the ground. And then I would say if you do the process that I said where you're basically taking and cover cropping and then you're transplanting into it for your spring crops and then you're transplanting in with your summer crops, be willing to have small spring crops. So don't worry that it didn't grow to full maturity. If you wanted to get some food, then a little bit of food is better than no food at all. So that's what I would say is know what's important to you and know where you're going to compromise. So if you compromise on the cover crop and you're not allowing the cover crop to grow to full maturity, then you want to add more organic matter. If you let the cover crop go too long, you can always pull it out of the ground and compost it separately. It's not the end of the world. It just means you're not necessarily benefiting in that particular bed from that chop and drop. So anything is possible. You just have to know what's important and what you're willing to do. All right?
Think about where you were at the start of this video. Cover crop in the ground, 3-week wait standing between you and spring planting, season slipping. Now look at what you know. Shave the cover crop all the way to bare earth. Dig a small pocket in just the spot where each transplant will go. Break the root system in that pocket. Plant the transplant immediately. Bok choy in 21 days. Peas shortly after. No waiting, no nutrient robbery, no wasted season. And in the beds where you planted garlic last autumn, pull every other plant as baby spring garlic. Plant tomato transplants between the ones that remain. And by mid-June, the garlic is out and the tomatoes have the whole bed. 2 harvests, 1 bed every single year. This is how Stacey Murphy thinks about spring. No day of the growing season is wasted. You are not the gardener who waits 3 weeks anymore. You are the one who shaves the cover crop, who digs the pocket, who gets spring food in the ground the same day, who plants garlic in autumn knowing exactly where the tomatoes will go in spring. If you want to keep learning from Stacey Murphy, there is a whole community of gardeners growing extraordinary food completely free at growyourownvegetables.org. This Q&A was recorded at a past Grow Your Own Vegetables event, and what Stacey just shared with you took her years of growing, failing, and figuring out to discover. Now imagine sitting down with 15 experts, exactly like her. 15 of the most respected gardeners, herbalists, and soil scientists on the planet, each sharing the single most powerful lesson they know, the insight that changed everything about how they grow food, the thing they wish someone had told them at the beginning. Clinical herbalists who can turn your garden into a medicine cabinet, soil scientists who will change how you see every handful of dirt, food growers who have fed entire communities from a backyard. All of it waiting for you right now, completely free at the Superfood Garden Summit. Go to growyourownvegetables.org/summit, register in 30 seconds, and start watching immediately.